Okay, let's talk manual starter restring lab today. You're either going to have one of the manual starters from the bin of extras, or you're going to have one off of a piece of equipment that actually needs to be restrung. First thing that we're going to do is pull out the string and then use an appropriate tool to block the pulley from retracting the string. So we're going to basically wind up the spring and lock it in a loaded position. Before we get too much further, let's go ahead and talk about some of the tools that you might want to grab and have handy for doing this lab. I'm going to take you out of the tripod here, sorry for the shaking. At the very least, you probably need a tape measure and a flat-headed screwdriver. You may or may not need a side cutters. You might need a smaller flathead screwdriver, a needle nose, a pair of pliers. You might need a lighter for melting the string if you're actually restringing, and you might need some string. I keep a spool of the number 4.5 because it seems to work on a lot of machines, but they do have different diameters, so we'll need to check that before we restring it. Sometimes you might need a pair of vice grips or a nut driver. Probably not a chisel and hammer or a magnet, but I have those over here because I also have some other starters over here that you probably saw. This is another example. This one's got plastic pawls. I don't actually remember what machine this is off of. This one here is off of a Toro, and it has a different style pawl as well. And then I have the older Briggs & Stratton ball clutch, and then a starter with it. This is from that 45-year-old Briggs & Stratton engine that I made a couple of videos on. I figure this one might be interesting to open up the ball clutch and maybe even remove the spring on this one just to see how they did over 45 years. And then a different style that we don't really see as much anymore, but they're out there, and that's these vertical pull ones that I believe came on some of the older Tecumsehs. So those are some of the tools, the common tools and starters. Let me show you some specialty tools too. So right here, these are some Briggs & Stratton starter kits and tools designed to service these ball clutch style starters. And then we even have a couple of shop-made tools for winding up and locking in those starters that go with the ball clutch here. Okay, back to the lab. First thing we're going to do is we're going to pull the string out. I'm using my thumb to hold the pulley from spinning. You do need to be careful with this. Don't let these pawls catch you if you let that pulley slip, and have your tools ready for you. So the easiest way to lock these into place is take your screwdriver and just put it right through the slots that are available, and then just make sure it traps your screwdriver, and then be careful about how you set it down so you don't pop your screwdriver up and out of there. Then we're going to want to grab the knot here, and we can either untie it if it's not that tightly tied, but sometimes these get really tight, or if people have already restrung it, they might have melted the knot, or perhaps I'm just impatient and wanting to keep the video short, so I'm going to just snip the knot right off. Okay? And then we can pull the string out. Set the string off to the side for a moment, and while it would be easy to just leave this wound up, part of the lab is restringing it and properly winding it, so I'm going to make you unwind this. So what we're going to do is we're going to very carefully hold the pulley, pull the screwdriver, and as we release it, we are going to count our turns. And so I'm going to use the hole where the string came from and the hole where it comes out of the housing as my index, and I'm going to count how many turns this was wound up. Just slowly walk it around at first here. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and about a half until it's fully unloaded. So 5.5 turns. I'm going to take my pen, And I'm going to write 5 1/2 turns. And that'll help me remember for putting it back together. Next thing I need to do is I need to get the handle off of my string here. This particular one has a staple that goes through it. So the string just goes right up the center of the handle and then a staple's punched through it. Other starters, mine have a hole that goes all the way through and the string goes up and through and a knot is tied. Still yet other starters might look like they don't have a hole, but what they have is a plug on the top that you would need to use a screwdriver for to get up underneath there, without poking yourself, and pop that cover up to expose your knot. So this one's pretty straightforward. Just going to get in here with a flathead screwdriver, work that up a little bit. Then I can come back with a pair of pliers, finish pulling that out. Don't lose the staple. We don't want that winding up in a tire, and you're going to need to put it back together. But now we can take our string, lay it out on the workbench, and take a measurement of how long it is. The string is not the same on all machines. So let's go over to an open spot. We'll lay it out for measuring. Alright, so this is one way to measure it. You can lay it out the long way and measure it if you have room for it. But if you're struggling for an open spot, or like me, trying to get it all in one shot, you can fold it in half, or in this case, fourths, and measure it that way. And you can see I'm pretty darn close to the 16 here. So 16 times 4 would be 64. So my rope is 64 inches long. So back at our work area here, we can go ahead and record 64 inches for our string length. And after instructor approval, it's now time to go ahead and put things back together. First thing I'm going to want to do is make sure my ends of my rope aren't frayed. Now if we cut it clean, this might be just fine to pass it through. If it doesn't, come find me and we can use the lighter to melt the ends together so that it doesn't fray so badly. We have to be careful about that so we don't burn ourselves. You can also take a piece of tape and wrap a piece of tape tightly around there and then snip it halfway in between the tape, and that will kind of help keep things from unraveling as you work with it. I'm going to go ahead and see how far I can get without doing anything to it. So now I have to wind up my spring, and so I'm going to start with my half a turn, 1 1/2, 2 1/2, 3 1/2, 4 1/2, 5 1/2 turns. I'm going to put a screwdriver in here to help hold it in place in case I end up losing it and letting go. I'll put my string in, do my best to line it up, go right through the hole. Looks like today's my lucky day. I'm going to pull it through a little bit, and then I got to go ahead and tie a knot. So I'm just going to loop it around, then stick it through. I'm going to hold on to that a little bit and push the loop up to the end, so that way my tag end is really short. And if I need to, I can take a pair of pliers, pull that tight so it's not going anywhere. We want to make sure that we have our knot pretty small, pretty tight, and this tag end pretty small, so that when we pull it, it sits in here. If it sits up too much, it could interfere. If this is too long, it could interfere with the pulley going around. It could either hit the fins on the flywheel, or it could get caught up in the inlet screen on the top here. So now that we have that installed, go ahead and put the handle back on our string here. So this one just pushes right up. Push that till it bottoms out and it stops. Take our staple. Try to get that lined up back into the existing holes that it came from. And then we can use a pair of pliers to help insert it. Okay, so there's that. I'm going to hold the pulley, pull my screwdriver, and then as I slowly let this in, it should take up the rope. And if I did everything right, my rope should be tight and want to pull back nicely like that. Okay, this is where you take this over to the instructor for an instructor checkpoint. But wait, there's more. Let me show you one thing here. Like on this Toro one where the handle seems to hang loose, and it looks like we could use another turn or half a turn with the rope. You don't necessarily have to undo the handle depending on the style of the starter. This one has a little bit of extra room around the outer pulley, so there's a little trick that we can play. We'll get some slack in our string. I'll take a screwdriver to pull the string up. I can take the string here and I can grab it and I can pull the pulley around by the string past all the bolt anchor points, and then I can now pull the slack back out, and now when I let go, you can see it pulls in tighter. Okay. This one, the pulley's really tight to it. You may not be able to do it. Now, if it's a shop one or if it's your piece of equipment, we could potentially make a notch in the pulley to allow you to bring the string around in a counterclockwise fashion. But depending on the pulley and the customer, it might be easier to just take the knot back out of the handle. So that's the lab. Make sure you submit your lab sheet. Make sure you put your starter and your tools away, however many you got out.